joined. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we're super excited to be joined by Atyab from MasterCard, Abdul Rahim from Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, Omar Salimullah, our new COO of SadaPay, and myself, Brandon Tyminski, CEO SadaPay. So if you guys want to go ahead and take a minute to introduce yourselves, Atyab, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I currently head the business for MasterCard in Pakistan. I've been in this role for 3 months, so Corona is like baptism by fire for us. And prior to that, I was with HBL, part of the digital team, and focusing on building digital transactions in Pakistan. And it's been a tremendous journey. It's great to sort of be part of two organizations who have been forward-looking and who have led the pack. And we hope that we can leverage the strength of MasterCard to help build a more digital Pakistan, especially in the payments and financial services space.
Hi, everyone.
Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Abdul Rahim. I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer and the Chief Information Security Officer for the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. Actually, today, I complete my 1 year at SECP, exactly. So prior to that, I spent about 9 years in Dubai, and prior to that, I was based out of Karachi. So I spent the last 15 years in financial services, both on the retail side as well as the corporate investment banking side, digitizing processes, launching systems, automating things. I also spent a lot of time with various regulators in strengthening our AML KYC processes and trying to improve the customer experience. So as you may know, SECP has a large role to play in ease of doing business for Pakistan. And currently we are driving a large digitization agenda, and happy to speak about it.
Omar?
Yes. Hi, my name is Omar Salimullah. I've been in the banking industry for quite some time now. Some people call me a veteran. So speak for, old person. So I started my career with the ABN AMRO, and then moved into digital banking with Nizam Bank, was with them for close to 10 years, set up all their digital channels, their digital strategy, moved to JS Bank, where we were working on setting up Pakistan's first truly digital bank with no brick and mortar branches, a completely new, a bank within a bank, a brand new brand. But now I feel that Fintech is something that it's very, very difficult to execute within banks. And that is why I'm with SadaPay now. I'm their Chief Operating Officer. And we're working to set up something really, really amazing for our users.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm Brandon Tyminski, the founder and CEO of SadaPay. We started this journey about a year ago, but I actually started my journey as an entrepreneur 14 years ago. And it was probably 2015 when I started my most recent prominent business, which was an on-demand fuel delivery company in the United States. In 2017, we inked an acquisition where we sold to one of our competitors in Silicon Valley. After that, I took some time to explore opportunity and ended up moving to Pakistan in end of 2018, where we essentially started looking at the opportunity for financial inclusion and how to launch a sort of challenger, a fintech challenger, a digital wallet, let's say, based on the EMI license. So during that time, I've met a number of really amazing people here in Pakistan, connected with business people, bankers, regulators, and found that there was a lot of support to do something new. So it's also very awesome to have so much support from MasterCard, for example, and SECP, State Bank, on all these new initiatives that we're working on. So in this discussion, we're essentially going to talk about what is going on in this world with banking, financial services, what the regulator is trying to do, what we can all do together to um, let's say, fight this coronavirus situation together and be efficient with business continuity, making sure that we can be prepared for the worst, and then also come out much better once things get resolved. So I'd like to open the discussion asking Abdul Rahim, what are SCCP's long-term goals for digitization, and how does that play into recent changes with coronavirus?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I think so. I had briefly mentioned about the key role SCCP has in ease of doing business, and so very briefly, I will cover. If you look at Pakistan's overall ease of doing business ranking, which significantly improved last year, and there are three key pillars where SCCP has a very direct influence. So starting a business being one, the other being protecting minority interest, and third being on the insolvency side. So we saw a 58-point jump in the starting a business metrics. So yeah, last year Pakistan was ranked 72. We are expecting the reforms we were undertaking last year, the ranking should further improve this year. And essentially what we've been trying to do is to simplify new businesses to being able to register with us in a simplified manner. Our portal, although old, has been in work for the last 10 to 12 years. All the services are available online. And actually we're in the process of, as part of our digitization journey, also to improve the user experience and bringing new technologies as well. Just reflecting on the current situation. So, as a CIO, my top priorities, it has been to how do we enable our staff and employees to continue working, to reduce the impact of disruption, and they're enabled so they can work from home. So so all our staff members can work remotely. Most of our services are available online. We spent a lot of time on information security and cyber security last year, which involved new governance models, training our staff members. So I think so all that work, I think no one expected the current situation. It's unprecedented, and I'm pleased to say, we're in a situation where we are quite ready in making sure that we can adopt to these situations. I think the same would hold true for any other organization. As a public sector organization in Pakistan, quite proud how the organization is structured. The support from the top management. So we are right now at 50%. Working at 50% strength, and the other 50% is working remotely, and making sure that all the right guidelines of the World Health Organizations are followed within the organization. Besides that, on the on the upcoming plan, so we spent a lot of time with fintechs and startups last year, specifically also working with a lot of incubation centers across the country. And as a result, some of you may know, we drafted a lot of proposals to facilitate startups in Pakistan, which broadly include defining what a startup should mean, so we can start incentivizing startups. And we introduced different options under law, for example, allowing the employee stock options for startup companies, allowing startups to buy back shares from founders, reducing the approval requirements and the amount of time you need to come to SCCP for getting approvals. So a lot of these other proposals, happy to send a link if they are also available on our website. And so they're right now they are going through the legislative process since they're part of the act, which needs to be approved by the parliament. So once approved, those changes will be available to all the startups and fintech companies in Pakistan. Besides that, we just recently also launched a sandbox approach. So we are encouraging new business ideas, new innovative approaches. Our, the deadline for the first cohort just closed, we received a quite sizable amount of applications and people coming up with really interesting and new innovative business ideas from a technology perspective across different sectors, and very excited to work with these founders and entrepreneurs in in working through, and hopefully some of these ideas coming to life at the end of the um, at the end of the cycle. We are also
what are the trends that you see there on the sandbox? What kind of companies, what kind of projects? Are there any popular things that are being put in front of you guys?
Yeah, so I think I would start with crowdfunding being one. I think there's a lot of interest from people to launch crowdfunding platforms in Pakistan. There seems to be appetite there, and happy to work with them in terms of the regulatory framework and the licensing process. There's also a lot on digital insurance, so different business models coming through, specifically on the insurance side, both from a distribution and claim handling perspective. I would say the third being more on the identity side, so KYC, AML, digital boarding. So I think that's broadly. There's also interest about learning more about how our approach is to let's say digital assets, for example, and that's something people have proposed some business models on that as well. So that's how I would classify the different themes coming through. Obviously, we will go through the screening process, and we'll see which actually end up in terms of being accepted in the cohort. Besides that, uh, I don't know how much time Brendan I have, but besides that, given despite these times, I think we are trying to hopefully launch the secure transaction registry system in Pakistan. So what that will do is enable specifically the SMEs and the smaller SMEs to get their movable collateral registered with financial institutions, and then for to enable them to secure credit against those collateral from financial institutions. So it's a big step forward from a financial inclusion and lending to SMEs perspective. And so we are hoping we'll go live by the end of this month with that with the new system. Similarly, there are other initiatives around.
Point.
Yeah.
The point you have about SMEs and digitizing those assets is actually interesting. I wanted to get Atyab's opinion here because I know that there was a lot of work being done by MasterCard with an MPOS, I think, which would be positioned towards these SMEs where they could start to, let's say, formalize their business and transact through a digital means. And is there anything that you guys are working on, Atyab, where you can also keep track of the business's assets outside of inventory, or is that mostly the focus?
Sure. Look, the MPOS is, I think, it doesn't do justice to call it just an MPOS. It's a business facilitation tool, right? And it can plug into any open source systems that SMEs, primarily retailers or consumer-facing businesses are using, and help them get transactions linked to the inventory that they have, and they can extend it to managing payroll. They can extend it to managing upstream payments. It really is a question of how adept they are to using technology across all forms of transactions, and that really has been a challenge in Pakistan, where when working with SMEs, no formal data had been available, which prevented banks from lending to them, and that's why this $263 billion opportunity sort of remains untapped in Pakistan. So with what I'm hearing with what SCP is trying to do in terms of registration of the assets, and then what is being done in digitization for different SMEs, it'll help create this environment of data richness for the SMEs that they can use to approach fintechs and banks for lending purposes and business facilitation purposes.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So-
and Athiya, one thing that we're also very excited about is, I think we've discussed this previously as well, it's the soft POS. So how
Yeah.
do you see that panning out here in Pakistan? What sort of timelines are you looking at in terms of mass or of certain scale coming into
So
Pakistan?
we have onboarded
And maybe you
a
can
technology
explain
partner.
a little bit what soft POS is. Maybe some of the attendees might not know yet.
Sure. So the soft POS is going to be, there are going to be two aspects of the soft POS. One is just an SDK that's available for um, retailers who are already using a smartphone. So they could download an SDK either into a software that they're using at the moment, or download an app that we are working on creating. Secondly, if we're now working with a technology partner who has identified a hardware provider, so that we can create $6,000 rupees smartphone indigenously made in Pakistan that they could buy. That essentially wouldn't have any duties on it, and they could start using it. So the idea is to leverage this 70 million odd number of smartphones in the country and potentially create every single one of them into a transaction terminal. Now, at this point in time, there are about 250,000 merchants who are working with telcos, I think slightly more. Most of them have smartphones. My previous employer that has nearly 40,000 merchants that are working with their branchless banking initiative, all of them have a smartphone from what I'm hearing. So being able to convert a smartphone into a terminal that accepts tap on glass, that's contactless payments, or a dip or a swipe of a card, or an NFC from a smartphone, or use of a QR, should also be available in that soft POS. And that's what this device would do. It would enable merchants to accept all forms of retail transactions, non-cash retail transactions. And the second rendition of this would be that in order for them to have a more transparent view of their cash flows, they can even record their cash transactions. Now, what that would do is create a richer data around what their cash flow looks like, how they're expecting different form or accepting different forms of transactions, and eventually help us digitize some of those cash transactions that we'll be seeing at these locations.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how merchants would be able to accept contactless payments, right, with a smartphone potentially to the soft POS that they would have in their hand, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in light of how this works with SCCP and maybe onboarding new merchants or formalizing new merchants or formalizing any merchant, which might have been cash, what are the things that SCCP looks to do in order to try and get those small businesses, those Kirana stores to formalize, if maybe MasterCard convinces them to work with this system? If they're not already registered, are there some sorts of benefits that they can get excited about?
Yeah, I think, Brandon, what we've been trying to do is to just make it easier, right? Really, either for the smaller businesses or for the common man. And what we've been trying to do is to position it as a one-stop shop solution. So if you see today, SCCP is integrated with Navra, with FVR, with the EOBI, with two provincial governments, with excise and taxation departments. We are right now also going to get integrated with the intellectual property organization. So what we want to do is to make it, make the process so simplified as, using, for example, a social media account. Like, no one needs to teach you how to use Facebook or LinkedIn. So, use that process as much as easier as possible, and also try to, in the future, create an ecosystem, right? So we are also working with for example, State Bank and the banks, on how we can facilitate, let's say, account opening, once a company is registered with us, and also exploring what other kind of services we can provide to these smaller companies. We also have plans, for example, to open our, published data. We already do publish some data, and as much as possible, publish data through APIs. So, we are trying to evolve. Our vision is to have that integrated platform across industries, across different players, across different and with different regulators, to just make that onboarding as integrated and as seamless as possible.
I think we just got an interesting question.
Yeah.
And so let's not wait till the end. So question for SCCP, Abdul Rahim, how about making it mandatory for all merchants beyond a certain turnover to offer customers the option to make digital payments? So basically they're saying that any merchant which is beyond a certain size, SCCP should apparently mandate those merchants to have digital payment options. Is that under your purview? Can SCCP do that? Or?
I would doubt, and I'm happy to come back from a policy perspective. But my initial thoughts would be that payments comes under the domain of State Bank, and it's just difficult for us to mandate. Obviously, like I said, we closely work with different other regulators like State Bank and FBR, and we have established mechanisms to work together on different initiatives. So, we do, and as part of our agenda to facilitate businesses, we also regularly send our proposals to State Bank or FVR, for instance. So, something to definitely think about, but I think it would definitely come under State Bank's domain. But happy to look into it with the policy guys.
So I think there's another question related to this that was posted by Iqbal Azim, which is that in light of the COVID outbreak, STP has rolled out various circulars trying to relax some of the paper-based payment requirements. This is an option to roll out any and all digital payments. Anything the forum could suggest to capitalize the opportunity, perhaps suggest permanent regulatory reforms. So, Brandon, I think you wanted to answer this live according to the Q&A section.
Oh, no. I thought you were answering it, so I pressed answer live. No,
okay.
you don't.
All right.
Yeah, that's yours.
All right. So, yeah, and first of all, we need to commend what the State Bank is doing. I've been in direct contact with the payments services team there, and the speed with which they're coming out with digital friendly regulation needs to be commended. Now, the other aspect of that, rather than looking for the State Bank to mandate all forms of digital payments, the other aspect of this is to create acceptance and create this environment where people feel comfortable not only taking digital payments for the services and goods that they're providing, but also they feel comfortable using this as a service as a consumer. And that's where the gap is. What we'll see in light of COVID-19 is a series of efforts being done as stopgap arrangements by different banks to respond to the regulation that is coming out. What I would respectfully request my colleagues in banks to do is to not take a shotgun approach, but take a very methodical approach in seeing how these regulations that are coming out from the State Bank and from other regulators, in light of this drastic situation, how could they become scalable efforts in their space, and rather than opening up certain channels at non-scalable price points and non-scalable cost centers, what they should be looking at is an approach where they're offering the right tools, the right mechanisms to the right partners, especially the SME merchants, SME retailers, that helps them adopt these digital transactions in a way that doesn't become cumbersome for them 9 months, 90 days down the road when these emergency provisions go away. And that would, with that approach, I think what we would be doing is creating an environment where we would see a scale up of digital payments. An example is when QR came out, right? When QR came out, and MasterCard was a pioneer in that in this country, and then others followed as well. The approach we took was to have these ridiculous discounts on fast food restaurants, right? And what we see is that the moment these discounts go away, so do the transactions, to the point that I think we have now somewhat spoiled the market. If banks and other providers would take an approach where these discounts were provided on behavior changing transactions, that would have seen a more sustainable adaptation or more sustainable adoption of these transactions. So using this time to build use cases in the grocery space, using this time to build use cases in the pharmaceutical space, could have longer lasting impact. I know for a fact that the State Bank now is working on some regulation for contactless, and once that comes out, we should see a lot of banks who are in the back end ready with the contactless provision. They would start creating acceptance in the market as yet. So we do see that changing in light of the regulation that is expected to come out.
Yeah, in the US and all over Europe, I really enjoy contactless payments, and I'm really excited to see them come to Pakistan. So what kind of timeline are we looking at to have terminals that can accept NFC payments?
So some of the banks that we are talking to, they had this on their agenda for May and June to have the first contactless ready terminals in the market. The thing is that the hardware that exists in the market, some of that hardware is already ready. It's just the rails that need to be created, and that requires software upgrades. So some of the banks we were talking to said May, June. Now one of the banks that we are talking to is even talking about doing it earlier. So as the lockdown situation eases and access to market becomes easier, then I think those software upgrades would start to happen, and we might see the first deployment as early as mid-May.
Wow. Yeah. So by the way, we're actually issuing cards by default that will be contactless. So just throwing that out there.
I think all of us here agree that to unlock Pakistan's next phase of digital payments, I think merchants are going to play an extremely key role in getting us across that hump. An interesting suggestion that's come in through our chat is that how about creating a tax loyalty program for merchants in lieu of digital payments, where they will receive tax loyalty points to redeem against their tax obligations, which I think basically means that if a merchant is willing to accept digital payments, there will be some incentivize the merchants through tax breaks. And that's a way of putting the carrot somewhere where it counts.
Yeah.
Interesting suggestion. So Abdul Rahim, do you have any feedback on that?
No, I think it's definitely interesting. I think it's one way of again incentivizing. So it could be either through a loyalty program, or potentially like giving tax breaks. For example, when we were looking to make proposals for startups, as part of that, we did make proposals for FBR to, let's say, give breaks on the withholding tax or the sales tax or the income tax side to the startups in terms of the definition we've devised again. So another suggestion we can take on board and pass it to FBR.
What does the data sharing look like between FBR, SCCP, and State Bank? You guys have a hard time working together?
No, I think like I mentioned, Brandon, so there are various forums. So the highest being the ECC, which is actually chaired by the advisor to the PM on finance, Dr. Afish Sheikh, and that's attended by both the chairman SCP, chairman FBR, as well as the governor of State Bank. And outside that, there are other various uh, um, engagement sessions and governance models existing. So I think we do interact a lot. Currently on the STR system, it's a joint effort actually with the State Bank of Pakistan. Given the impact it has in the economy. So I think we've got on a working level and operating level, very good relationship working with both State Bank and FBR, and we do jointly work on various initiatives. So, the one-stop shop in terms of businesses not being required to go to FBR and being able to get the national tax numbers through our portal again. Was a joint effort between CCP and FDR. So, I mean, many examples of where we, as and when required, and collaborate to work on joint initiatives.
Interesting. So
I think I'll pick on a couple of things from the Q&A, Brandon. I think we talked about, in the current situation. So I think our policy team has also done is also to facilitate business, relax a lot of conditions in the current environment. So things like the filing of financial statements, quarterly filing, which is a mandatory requirement, as well as holding board meetings and annual general meetings. Similarly, sending information to shareholders by post. So there's a lot of steps taken by CCP to facilitate the businesses in the current situation, and similarly also issued guidelines for insurance companies given the current outbreak where people need their claims to be quickly processed. So how and what guidelines or what measures insurance companies can take to facilitate their policy holders, etc. And I know for sure the policy guys are working on more, other initiatives as well, which I think will be issued shortly as well. Similarly to State Bank, I think also to facilitate the NBFC sector, SCCP is allowed for the borrowers of NBFCs to request the rescheduling of the loans as well. So there's a lot of steps taken. All the information is also available. There are other steps which are in pipeline and which will come, shortly as well. I was looking at I'll take one more question on the crowdfunding side. So like I said, on the crowdfunding, we've got several applications for crowdfunding, and once we've screened those and accepted in terms of the cohort, our cohort will start end of July, August. We'll see how the situation pans out, and we are aiming to conclude by the end of January next year. So I think if that process is successful, we should look at issuing full-scale licenses to entities by end of January next year in crowdfunding. Obviously, firms who get accepted as part of the sandbox will be issued limited licenses to go ahead and test that.
So in regards to the companies that are under the purview of SCCP, and in light of everything that's happening with COVID-19, is there any movement on cloud? How does the regulator feel about cloud, domestic cloud, offshore cloud? What are the discussions?
Okay, so from our end, right, we don't have a legal requirement for the customers we regulate in terms of the information requirement being on-prem or on public clouds within the country. So I think we ourselves, being a government entity or public sector entity, our first preference has always been to keep information on-prem or within the country. I think now with time, there's also, there are a lot of other entities which have come up with public clouds, which are available in Pakistan. And, there's very robust infrastructure available right now to companies who want to use that infrastructure within Pakistan. But I know there are other customers who leverage on solutions which are cloud-based, and I think it really comes down to the how companies would classify their information, and really comes down to the data sensitivity and their own data confidentiality and privacy policies. And they, as may they choose relevant, but our preference has been that all our sensitive or government data stays on the ground. But for our customers, I know they're using various cloud-based solutions in different domains.
So Atyab, before we started the broadcast, you were discussing how MasterCard has a great work from home culture, but you coming from HPL and spending so many years in banking, how do you feel the banks are dealing with this new thing, working from home? This is such a strange concept. Is this something that do you think will stick around, or banks are just waiting to get back to the offices because they're just reliant on so many systems that are stuck in the office? How do you think the financial sector is coping?
So, look, this takes me back to a conversation I had with the head of HR at my previous employer nearly 3.5 years ago when I joined. And there are two things I took up with him. I said, look, I need my team to work from anywhere in the world, essentially. And the other thing was a relaxation on the typical bank's dress policy. That was an easier word to get past. And at that time, I remember laughed out of that room when we talked about work from home. Because they said, well, we are a bank, we cannot work from home. We rely on a lot of critical systems, and our work is all about interaction. We have to interact with our colleagues, and we have to interact with others. But surprisingly, what I see in Pakistan is that banks are coping well. They have split shift policies. They have a critical employee policy that they're working on, and they were very quick to adapt to this situation. What that shows us is that the hindrance is not the people who work at a bank or the systems that they use. The hindrance is the culture and mindset. And when push comes to shove, culture and mindset can be quickly changed. We see that in a lot of the large banks in Pakistan, and we're starting to see that in smaller banks in Pakistan as well. So I'm encouraged that once the dust settles and Corona is behind us, what we would find is a new paradigm in how work is approached. And we would become a more deadline-oriented industry. We'd become a more collaboration-focused industry, and we would see a breaking down of the silos. As we are going through it, it's hard to see the change because it has come very quickly, but all signs point in the right direction. And this is an opportunity for all industries, especially the financial services industry, to look at the way they have been doing things and break these idols that we have created over a period of time on how banking has to be done a certain way. We are in it. The change is here. So let's just adapt the change and make it permanent.
Yeah. So do you see that there's going to be more collaboration between banks and fintechs?
Absolutely. What this is showing us is that there are chinks in both armors, right? And Umar knows this, that I've been a proponent of banks and fintechs rather than banks versus fintechs for a very long time. And for a while, when we were both in banking, we were fighting that fight. We see that there is a lot of potential where fintechs can come in and pick up the weak points of services provided by banking and offer what banks could adapt very quickly. And similarly, fintechs now have the opportunity to really leverage the complexities that come with being a financial services institution. Banks understand that really well. Banks have over a period of time developed a good understanding of regulation and implementing regulation.
Mm.
Fintechs are still going through that process. So in this post, or inshallah soon, when there is a post-COVID era, what I expect to see in this industry is leveraging the strengths fintechs have when it comes to agility, innovation, taking risks in new markets, and leveraging the strengths that banks have, that is building trust with the customer, understanding regulation, and understanding risk. So with the combination of both these strengths, I do see an environment emerging where fintechs would provide certain services to the consumer that banks have been unable to. They would be able to get into certain markets that banks have avoided because of lack of data and lack of technology to tap those markets. And I see fintechs getting a lot of scale by leveraging the trust that their partnering banks would have with the existing and potential clientele.
I wanted to quickly get a comment from Omar, because he, in his last position with JS Bank, was head of ecosystem and open banking, and was trying to make all these partnerships happen with fintech. So how do you see this panning out, Omar?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different point of view. I've I've burned my fingers with a lot of the fintechs that are out there, and it's not their fault. I think that the ecosystem in Pakistan is super immature at the moment. They haven't been given space to grow, unfortunately. And in a discussion between fintechs and banks, fintechs have zero leverage, and so to go into a conversation or a negotiation with nothing in your arsenal, I mean, it's something that, it's very, very difficult for fintechs to go and partner with banks. My advice has always been to bypass the banks. What WhatsApp did to telcos is what fintechs need to do to banks. It has to be an over-the-top sort of situation that comes in and just plucks the big business out from under their feet. Getting involved in the bureaucracy of banks and trying to tie up partnerships is a losing cause. And any business model that is reliant on this sort of partnership or this sort of cooperation from banks is bound to fail, unfortunately. I don't take any pleasure in saying this, but I don't agree.
So Umar, I have a follow-up question on this, right? And so how do you see the financial landscape in Pakistan? Do you see the opportunity for just digital-only banks? Somewhat what we've seen in the US and in Europe. So banks like Revolut or N26, coming along, and some of the challenges you think. So what do you think? For banks or for fintech companies, like you mentioned, if they have to come in on a standalone basis, being able to operate solely as a digital bank, only bank?
Yeah, I think it's a total myth that people in Pakistan expect brick and mortar for them to be able to trust a brand with their finances. For example, if tomorrow Facebook or TikTok starts offering financial services to Pakistanis, people would keep a lot of money on those platforms. And these companies are definitely not present here in Pakistan. So, I mean, I think it's a total myth that we need brick and mortar. We need a place where people couldn't go and talk to people and start, interacting with human beings. You just need to provide the kind of ubiquity that people expect with money. So the problem right now with digital payments is that money, cash, is never refused by anybody. It's always honored, and it works everywhere. The problem with digital payments at the moment is that, it works rarely. There are a lot of times when things can go wrong, and then there's a whole process in which, people have to wait to get their own money back. And so what fintechs need to do is or banks need to do if they want to promote digital banking is to ensure that the systems are super robust. Their reversal processes or SOPs are quick, are instant. They are willing to take the risk of reversing people money before, analyzing each and everything and assuming that this person is lying, and not returning money for 45 days, on average. And also in terms of, I think I see a question here as well. Somebody said chicken and egg question. Merchants, especially small scale, don't want to offer digital payments because they don't believe they have customers who would use it. Again, I beg to differ. I think what's missing here is that we haven't really understood what small merchants require when it comes to cash management, when it comes to digital payments. And I am willing to bet that if you really sit with them and you try to understand what exactly that they're looking for, and I think Atiyab alluded to having a solution which also takes into account their supply chain, setups and a lot of the back end stuff that they're doing manually right now. If you take into account what they're looking for, they will be more than happy to offer digital payments. And there are people in that market, in that Karyana store market, for example, who the customers have wallets. There are a lot of branchless banking wallets. They're already on, they're already using smartphones. They're already using those apps, Easy Paisa and the Jazz Cashes of the world. And so to convert the users onto digital payments is easy. You just need to convince the merchant what's in it for them. I would also like to reach out to acquiring companies to figure out ways on which they can have different tiers of POS terminals. Trying to offer this $500 POS terminal to everyone is, of course, madness. So leveraging the soft POS program that MasterCard and the schemes are bringing in, having very low cost physical terminals that you can give out on rent. You don't have to, you could do sort of a monthly rent on those
or QR.
Or QR. Atiyab, I have a little bit of a thing about QRs. I think static QR in Pakistan is too much of a learning curve, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it puts all the burden on the user, on the card holder or the customer. And so I think there's a problem there. Dynamic QR, I'm a big fan of. I think if it's a merchant presented QR, which is dynamic, I think that works. The customer just has to scan it and say, okay. So I think that in my mind, the ball rests in the acquirer's court. 100%.
Yeah.
Fix the acquiring side of things in Pakistan. Digital payments will improve a lot. The society will become a lot more documented. Taxation will improve. Acquirers need to stand up.
On tax,
and I agree with you.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Brandon. The small merchant just needs their life to be made easier, right? And there is a cost of doing business in cash, and sometimes that cost is ridiculously high, 7, 8, 10% of the money that they're earning, not taking into account the frauds that happen with fake currency being frequently used in the market, with them being robbed and whatnot. So just handling cash is expensive, and it's easy, sure, but there is no data associated with it. So I did see a question about building use cases for merchants. I think the most important thing is to for acquirers to stop looking at merchants as someone that they could charge 2.5%. It's about how they can offer the services that are needed to make the business run smartly and in better ways and in more efficient ways. And if you do that for merchants will see the value and they will start adopting digital payments. Sure, there is a caveat that they don't want to be taxed, but let's appeal to the general goodness of people and assume that they're a good citizen who will do the responsible thing when they're making money, and they know that they're making money in ways that can be counted and measured, they would step up and do the right thing and pay their taxes. I believe in the genuine goodness of people, and most people want to live a life where they're doing their part as citizens.
I think just want to quickly add to Umar's passionate response about banks and fintechs, and so I would agree 100% on the ecosystem. I think one thing which is lacking from an infrastructure and perspective to encourage and to get these fintechs really scale up is the ecosystem. So, for example, in Pakistan, a lot of work has gone into AML space, specifically post the country being put in the FATF grey list. So and that created new work for different participants in the financial sector. And I really believe it's some work I did when I was based out of Dubai, and we have seen recently how different participants, regulators, financial institutions, companies coming together and creating an integrated platform where it just makes it easier across the ecosystem to share information, makes it operationally efficient, and really cut downs the cost for different participants. So I think that's one area where I believe if we continue to work, we're having different conversations with different market players, with different regulators, to take that agenda forward in terms of creating that ecosystem. And I'll just link it to someone's comment on the digital finance journey and so absolutely. So we will see these digital marketplaces develop. I agree, it's just not only about payments, but these digital marketplace or the digital economy will start coming together once we have that integrated ecosystem, which countries like Estonia has built, or what the UAE and specifically Dubai is trying to do. And so I think that requires a public-private partnership, continue to have that dialogue and that forward-looking conversation to actually build that system. And I think once that integrated ecosystem is in place, I'm a strong believer that we will see a lot of these fintechs and startups scaling and really providing services given what the customers need at the end.
So there was a chicken and an egg comment that I wanted to kind of go back to, because people are curious. You have merchants, you have consumers, which do you grow first? But I'm more curious about which protocol. So is it contactless? Is it debit cards? Is it something else that we haven't seen in the future? So I'm curious, Atyab, what bet is MasterCard making, or are you guys are just still waiting to see what picks up? Is there a leader? Is Pakistan going to go towards QR like China and India, or are we not ready for that?
So a couple of things, right? QR was a great technology for certain markets, and it's been in Pakistan for 3 years. To answer your question, it's going to be a combination of all of them. So we would see QR in tier 3, tier 4 merchants. We could see a dynamic QR there as well. We would see contactless in most urban markets. We would see contactless in a lot of places. We would see card on file, which is what Kareem and Food Panda are doing and other e-commerce companies are doing. So as this market evolves, we are looking at a cornucopia of different payment solutions for different segments of the market. And all of it is to reduce reliance on cash, especially now because everyone from the WHO to the IMF and other much smarter people than I are are recommending that cash is probably not the way to go. And if in countries where cash is prevalent, we could probably see a longer impact of COVID because of such a physical exchange. So I do see contactless and smartphone enabled payments as the way to go in the immediate future. It could, if you look at some of the more futuristic projections, in some of the countries in the next 5 years, they could even start testing subdermal chips that they'll be putting right here. So, and from what I understand, there are a couple of countries where they've already started testing subdermal chips for payments. So Pakistan has a long way to go to get there, perhaps 15 to 20 years in my opinion. But in the immediate term, what we see is a move away from cash to contactless. And this has been seen in other markets where the moment contactless was introduced, cash payments in that market dropped from being close to 90% of transactions in the country, consumer-based transactions in the country, to the high 70s, and they continue to be on a downward trajectory. So, and I think the State Bank would also need to play a role where they continue to revise the limits on contactless as they see adoption, and make it so that it's not just for low-end payments. It could be for payments up to $100. In places like Dubai, we are seeing that immediately, very quickly, they went from 100 dirhams to 300 dirhams, which is close to $100. And in other markets where they have quickly moved the limits up to a point where people can do medium-sized transactions, the adoption has been quick. The onus of setting those limits should be with the banks, the kind of risk that they want to take on their customers, and should be with the customers based on their risk savvy and their own risk threshold.
Yeah, I saw in the UK that the FCA increased the limits only from £30 to £45 for contactless, which is not, I think, enough of a difference to really have an impact in light of Corona. If people are going and shopping for groceries in the UK, £45 is not enough. They're trying to reduce the amount of times someone is touching this finger pad. But in light of Corona, and now that we have to wrap up the session, I wanted to have a closing question for both of you, and it would be, I think we're all curious, what is the lasting impact that Corona might have? The most likely lasting impact, is it that we'll see from SCCP's point of view, more people are formalizing and trying to accept digital payments? Is it that banks start letting more people onboard their customers and MasterCard sees a lot more digital transactions coming through on a certain channel? What are the predictions that you guys have?
I think I'll start first, Brandon. I think what I would imagine is, so if you look at the trend, of companies being registered in Pakistan, so we have seen about between 15 to 19% growth month to month, and technology, tourism being one of these main sectors where we see the growth coming through. I think that said, what I expect is, in terms of how we are trying to move forward in terms of our journey, and I think what we discussed during the call, that it's, for most people maybe a wake-up call. So for some people, they were anticipating, but we do expect companies realizing that sooner than later they have to embark on this digital journey, and a lot of work which we are trying to do is in similar way, similar path. And I think what we can facilitate, and at the same time work with our regulators, that they are able to do the same for their operations. So something which is in pipeline is, for example, the work we are doing on XBRL, and what we are trying to do is create standardized taxonomies for financial statements and financial data. And for companies who already have information in a structured way, or provide us in a digital way. Once those regulations or regulatory framework comes into play, it will be easier for people to transition or integrate and work with us. So I think I do expect in the sector it will continue. That process will get fast tracked. People will realize that they need to be prepared for such unforeseen events, and I think digital is the way to go. So that's something I would expect. And I think, like I mentioned earlier as well, with more and more people getting comfortable with having data available, I also expect, and with the changes which we have proposed for startups getting soon approved by the parliament. So I do expect a lot of and along with the sandbox, so a lot of new companies and a lot of new business and innovative models are being evolved in the near future.
Definitely. Atyab, Omer?
So for me, look, we are still in the thick of it, right? And Pakistan has been somewhat shielded from the human impact of Corona so far. We are, and the pessimist in me thinks that there is a big surge coming in the next couple of weeks in Pakistan, which is going to impact the human resource. And that will create both supply side uncertainty and tremendous demand side uncertainty. So we would, in nearly 60 years of recorded economy, we would probably see this divergence between the supply in the market and the overwhelming demand for certain things. We have seen that in markets like Italy and Spain and the US, where all of a sudden grocery store shelves ran empty of multiple things. Thank God we have not seen that in Pakistan yet. There is a longer term human impact when it comes to people at the bottom of the pyramid and the daily wage earners who are starting to see this demand side impact really create havoc in their homes with lack of food, with lack of access. And when it comes to business, we do feel that transactions are going to, we are seeing a dip in transactions across the board. For Pakistan, we would see a dip in tourism. And for those of you who are following the Pakistan economy for 2020 and 2021, tourism was one of our big bets, right? This was going to be our year for tourism. And we expect that all of that cross-border transactions that we were going to see in Pakistan over the summer months and beyond is not going to happen. That is going to impact our foreign reserves. So in the immediate term, and this was a report by the IMF this morning as well, that economies like Pakistan are going to be adversely affected. Now, there is a silver lining, and the silver lining is our youthful population, both in terms of years and in terms of the mental maturity as well. So we believe that we will bounce back because of this youth bulge that we have. We believe that this is now a new era for freelancers. This is a new era for gig economy in Pakistan. As the lockdown eases, we would see growth in e-commerce because people could start expecting deliveries on a more regular basis. We've already seen around the world triple-digit growth in e-commerce. We expect to see a big portion of that coming into Pakistan as well. And we see companies that have digital business models, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's food delivery, whether it's ride hailing, or any other smart business models, we see them benefiting from COVID or in the post-COVID environment. And as Abdur Rahim said, this would help us look at new business models which most people thought would not be possible in Pakistan. So the lens is shifting, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. So I agree with you on a number of those things, but most importantly, I think the biggest impact that we might see could be in the youth population. As you mentioned, there's 600,000 college graduates, I believe, here in Pakistan each year, that these people graduate with law degrees, and they have skills to write or design or do a bunch of amazing things for employers globally. So given that there might be an impact to the employment rate or the unemployment rate, a lot of people might find that they have better prospects finding work online globally. So that's one of the things that we'll work on at SadaPay as well. I know there's a number of potential customers who've joined the Zoom webinar. So yeah, we're looking forward to see how we can help as best as possible to support the people who will be transacting globally. International payments is a big focus for us. So I think that wraps up the session. Omer, did you have any closing remarks, any point that you wanted to make? Otherwise, we could say our goodbyes.
Yeah, no, just a very short thing. I think that post-COVID, I do think that it's going to be business as usual when it comes to financial institutions. I think the culture is too deeply rooted for them to really have a paradigm shift or an epiphany of some sort. I think where things will change drastically is on the regulator side. I think that now the regulator has, even before this, I think the kind of work that have been done recently in terms of trying to push digital payments towards where they should be in Pakistan was immense. State Bank has done a great job. But I think post-COVID, it's going to get very, very strict when it comes to regulations. I think banks will have nowhere to hide. Banks will have pressure on their fees and charges that they have been charging so far on digital channels. And I think it's going to be a very, very interesting time for players like us, or Sims of the world, the Kinus of the world, the Kareem Pays of the world. I think it's going to be a fun time, inshallah. So looking forward to just getting out of the house and getting things done.
Yeah, definitely. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. And
thank you so much, guys.
There's a lot of gems that we have.
Welcome.
So
Thank you for inviting us.
stay safe.
Thank you. And, let's take a moment to appreciate the hard work the front end people in the hospitals are doing to keep this away from everyone else.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you to all the attendees as well. The questions were fantastic. And we'll be doing this very, very regularly, guys. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.